One of my favorite board games is Guess Who, so we're going to play it right now, but I don't think this person's actually listed as a person on Guess Who.
No.
So it's the Connecticut version of Guess Who.
All right.
Ready?
All right.
Our special guest today works at Cherokee.
Taught third grade for 3 years here at Connecticut.
I think they went to Cortland, maybe?
I think he said something about playing soccer. That's a big guess.
That's a big clue.
Right?
That's always like half the board on Guess Who.
Right.
Is well known for a high energy classroom.
I'm wondering if they can guess who it is now. For our Cherokee listeners specifically.
It's not Michael Jordan. But
that is a good hint. But today we have Jordan Sabinsky on with us. And Jordan, let's talk about a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go into our topic.
Yeah, so when I started teaching, I originally started teaching kindergarten, and I taught that for 2 years. This is now, as they had mentioned, my third year in third grade. But I always reference my kindergarten experience because I feel like that's where it started in terms of setting the culture for my classroom, the high standard, the expectations. So even though I'm teaching a completely different grade, the kids are much older, this is a testing grade, I still, and you'll see throughout this episode, that I relate everything kind of back to that kindergarten mindset of wanting to achieve something that's universally great, to push the standard, to do it in a way that people walk into this classroom and they don't just say like that was a great lesson, they call it an experience. And that really has all stemmed from my beginning years starting as a teacher.
Awesome. So this is exactly why we chose Jordan for classroom culture. I think that classroom culture stems from everything that you do. Kind of like with student engagement. If you don't have them engaged, you can lose them. And so Jordan's going to talk a little bit about that. So you talked about how it all stems from kindergarten. Tell us a little bit about your kindergarten experience.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like I almost taught kindergarten as if I had a chip on my shoulder, because I think people associate kindergarten with just, it's a lot of fun, it's their first experience sometimes in a public school if they hadn't gone to preschool. But I didn't want someone, and this is like really what my mindset was, I didn't want someone to walk by the classroom, see the writing on the wall and say like, oh my god, that's so cute, like look, they're just starting to write. I wanted someone to walk by and say, wow, I've never seen 4 and 5-year-olds write like that. And that's where I talk about whether it's kindergarten, third grade, fifth grade. I wanted teachers of all the grade levels to walk by, look at my kindergarten class and say, wow, that is universally great no matter what grade it is. And so I think a lot of, say, what we learn in college is to backward design a lesson. And so what I've really done since the beginning of my career is I've tried to always think big picture. And I think it's so important, even, I almost don't even want to say just for a young teacher, but I almost want to say for all teachers, is not just to say backward design a lesson, but really backward design kind of your classroom of what you want to achieve throughout the year. I think one of the most important things is that you have a standard for which you want to go to by the end of the year. So whether it's like an academic standard, whether it's a behavior standard of what you want to achieve, I would say you start there, and then you could start to backward design. Okay, so I want them to achieve this academically. Okay, and then you start to think, well, how am I going to get there? But I think whether it's kindergarten or whether it's fifth grade, whether you're a new teacher or whether you've been teaching for 20 years, I think once you set that standard, then you could start to work backwards and figure out, okay, how am I going to do this?
So, Jordan, when I hear you talk about it, and this is a recurring theme when we have conversations, is that you hold your students to high standards, right? To me, that's only one aspect of what you do. Can you explain a little bit more about what classroom culture in general means to you? And I think that high standards is just one element of that.
Yeah. So real quick, though, just to touch on the high standard, I think what's been so important to me, and I think like I've communicated to anyone that I talk to this about, is that the high standard, your goal for your students should almost, for me personally, should almost scare you in the way that you want to set the bar so high, because it's like that kind of cliche, you reach for the moon. If you don't reach it, you end up with the stars. And that's kind of what I want to do for my students. There's so much research that if you set the high standard, that the kids, they feel that, they start to rise to that standard. But I've always said, like you just said, that's only one part of it. because when I first started out, I was trying to decide, okay, what kind of teacher did I want to be? Okay, did I want to be the super tough teacher that got really high test scores? Okay, but did I want to be the really fun teacher that kids love coming to school? And so really, I think the correct answer is really just that balance, because you could have the highest test scores, but if your kids don't love coming into the classroom, if they don't love coming to school, then for me, that's not fulfilling. But then it's like if you have kids that love coming to school, that love being in your classroom, but aren't learning anything, well, then there's like the other side. Well, they are here to learn. So it's really, when they walk into this classroom, I want them to feel a sense of excitement. I want them to like not run through the hallway, but I want them to almost have just an excitement when they wake up in the morning, and I have parents tell me like they can't wait to come to school. And so I do that in many different ways. I think one of the biggest things is really engagement. I think that's a huge part of a culture. And there's so many different ways to engage students. I visited a school, it's called the Ron Clark Academy in Atlanta, Georgia. There's a movie based on the co-founder of the school, Ron Clark. It's on YouTube, played by Matthew Perry. And the whole school is centered around culture and engagement. And Ron Clark himself, he loves to stand on desks and walk across the classroom like that.
I think I've seen you do that before.
Yeah.
Yes. And so
I remember just walking through the hall, and I'm like, is he actually standing up on a desk right now?
Yeah.
And he was.
But really, because I do so much reflection, I think that's just so important overall. So I took that and I'm like, that seems so fun, right? And it started out as that, and just me copying the idea of, okay, let me just stand on a desk. But what it turned into was almost, I call it like a shift your mindset. When I stood on the desk and I had kids that say, weren't paying attention all the time throughout the lesson, all of a sudden their jaws started to drop. Their eyes were glued to me. I had kids walking in the hallway. They would pass the doorway. Then they would back up. Their eyes would dilate so much. And what I realized is I didn't transform the room. I didn't do a room transformation, which I can talk about that I do a decent amount in here. I didn't come up with this elaborate lesson. I wasn't switching the activity. I wasn't using all these different engagement strategies. All I did was I stood on a chair, and then I stood on one of their desks, and I had all of their attention. And so I reflected on that, and I realized that, again, engagement doesn't need to be this whole big production. It can be something so simple as just standing on a desk. And so I said, okay, well, I stood on a desk and I got all of their attention. So now, because if you do that every single time, then it's not going to have that same effect.
Right. Loses something after a while.
So then I said, okay. So they just did a turn and talk. Then I said, okay, I want you to whisper back the answer to me, right? Because they're so used to, okay, let me just call out, right, what we just talked about.
Normal volume, yeah.
So my philosophy on engagement, it wasn't, okay, I need to design this elaborate lesson. I need to do 20 different activities. It was about, what can I do? What can I switch that's going to keep their attention? So for example, say like a lot of teachers have these like slideshows when it comes to their math lesson. And so let's just say it's like four slides. My view on engagement, especially with young kids, especially in elementary school, is every slide that you have on the board that you're standing in front of the kids and you're teaching, you're starting to slowly lose the class. Right? Because it's like that old school like lecture style. Like it doesn't work anymore. So I said, okay, for that first slide, I'm going to have them do a turn and talk. For the second slide, I'm going to have them lead me through it. I'm going to do different call and responses to keep their attention. For this third slide, I'm going to have them whisper the answer. So I kind of came up with this idea that every single slide you want to have a different engagement strategy. And that's kind of like what you referenced earlier. That's kind of that high energy environment. But at the same token, it could be super high energy for the first 3 slides. And then I kind of start talking slower. I say, okay, I want you on the count of 3 to whisper to your partner. So really what it is you're just switching up the energy, the tone that you're using, the voice level that you're using, the pace,
right,
because you're just keeping them on their toes, glued into you. Another part of it, so that's like a little bit about different activities that I do, or different ways to keep them when you're kind of teaching whole class. I think, and again, I learned this from kindergarten, and I think a lot of teachers know this, or like in college even I learned a little bit about this, but I think for whatever reason I don't see a lot of teachers doing this, and it's call and responses. So it's that simple, like, oh, class, oh, yes, class, yes, yes. But what I started to do is I started to come up with so many different ones, because if I just did oh class, oh yes every single day, all year, again, it loses that effect.
But you're not just talking about from like a classroom management standpoint, right? Don't you use like the call and response or the chants, let's say, to actually learn as well? Like
yes.
you use that to drive some information.
Yeah, so there's two. So I'll finish up about the call and response, and then I could go back to the chants. So, but the call and response is you can, like, I have a call and response. If I can't see you, and then the kids repeat back, then you can't see me. Mm-hmm. And so it's not just, oh, class, oh, yes. It's also almost giving them directions as they're stating it. And then what I think is really the trick is because I think a lot of teachers will just do, oh, class, oh, yes. And then like one or two will tell me, well, the class, like they're not good at that, or they don't listen. And so I try and tell them, one, obviously you have to follow through with it and communicate what you want from them after you say the call and response. But I think like this is a secret. I almost think you stack the call and responses. You kind of do one after another, because so I'll do, oh, class, oh, yes, class, yes. I'll then say track me. And anytime I say track me, the kids will clap their hands, keep them together, and then show me eye contact. So I just did 3 call and responses. So if you have a couple of kids in your classroom that maybe are always the ones that aren't getting that first call and response, they'll get the second one, or they'll hear the clap, they'll see everyone is now quiet. But it takes less than 20. Exactly. It takes me less than 20 seconds for me to do 3 call and responses. I now have their attention, because I think all too often teachers start going on with the next slide and they're missing, a group of their kids. I just think you do a simple call and response. Sometimes I'll do, oh, class, oh, yes, class, yes. You can do it loud, then you could do it soft to kind of bring down that energy. So that's like the call and responses that I do it all day. I do it all throughout the year. I started it in kindergarten. I kept the same exact call and responses that worked in kindergarten. I use them now in 3rd grade. What you just referenced is kind of like the chants. Mm-hmm. A huge part of the Ron Clark Academy, which I think everyone should just type that into YouTube and watch all the speeches and all the videos of the kids singing and dancing there. A huge part of their school is to incorporate songs and musics and lyrics into, say, learning math or learning reading.
And why is that? Why do we incorporate music?
Yeah, well, one of the reasons I think is just pure engagement of that. The kids are locked into that. Mm-hmm. Second reason, even if we remember our favorite songs, whether it's been a year or 5 years, you can recall almost every single lyric from that song. You can sing it in that
Absolutely.
Tune. So
Kevin is a pure example of...
If I were going to karaoke, that's who I would call.
If we need a song for something, we're calling on Kevin, and he's pulling it out, and he's rapping, or he's singing to it.
But there is something musically that helps it stick.
Exactly,
it sticky, right?
It's that same mindset, but now you're applying it to math. Mm-hmm. So instead of, again, just teaching them whatever it is about fractions, you could come up, and it doesn't need to be a full elaborate song. Because I'm sure there's people like me that are listening that say, like, I'm not creative like that. I can't just change the lyrics of this song and create an entire math song. You can just make it a chant, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like fraction. You could say fraction is part of a whole. You could say there's a word problem where the kids are given the perimeter. They're given 3 sides to a trapezoid, and they have to figure out the missing side. So I say, like, add them up, subtract from the sum, find the missing part, you're all done. And so the kids chant it. We have a drum in here. So all of a sudden you have one kid playing the drum, which could be the kid that has trouble focusing in your classroom. You have the class singing it. The kids beg me to sing it. And it's like, again, at the end of the day, they're singing about math. People don't realize it. I wouldn't call it a full-on movement break, but I would call it's just an organic movement embedded in your lesson. I think, not to kind of digress a little bit, but I think so many teachers are so focused on, okay, I have to give them 4 go noodle breaks. Once we finish a 40-minute lesson, I have to do a 2-minute go noodle, and then we're going to jump back to a 40-minute period of reading, right? But and then some teachers say, well, that doesn't work, or they...
You can incorporate that movement into the lesson
exactly,
itself. It doesn't have to be a separate
So thing. It's like when we're doing the singing, sometimes the kids will stand up, the kids are all moving their hands. So it's like, yes, that's not a full-on go noodle break, but you do that every few minutes in your lesson. All of a sudden, the kids feel like they've been moving all throughout that lesson.
I have to ask you a little bit about the technology piece.
Yeah.
are there tech tools that you use to create some of the chants or the songs or things
Yes.
like
That was in my head. I'm glad you brought it up.
I have one in my head
There you
that's
go.
sparking out, but I want to see if it's the same one you're using.
So, like, as I said, when I heard about the Ron Clark Academy and incorporating all of that music and the songs into my lessons, for some people, it's really songwriting, and that's not one of my talents. It's really not one of my skills that I'm able to just be like, okay, we're learning about perimeter, this is the song. So AI and ChatGPT is becoming such a huge part of just our world. And I really think for educators, again, whether you're a young teacher, whether you're a veteran teacher, there's nothing to really be afraid of. Use it as a tool. So I go on my computer on ChatGPT. I don't even have to log in anymore. It just comes right up, and you just say, you give it all the information you want. I teach 3rd grade, and I want my students to learn about perimeter. Can you create a 15-second chant that will help my students memorize how to find the perimeter of a triangle? And it comes right out. But you're able to specify exactly, I don't like the second line of the song. Can you change that? Can you make it 1 line longer? Can you make it 15 seconds longer? And it gives you all of the information.
I love what you just said about being super specific in 3rd grade, 15 seconds, and the topics that you wanted to cover. Whenever we talk about AI, the prompt is so important, right? It's only, the output is only as good as the input.
Exactly.
And so I think some people try it and they don't have a detailed enough prompt and they just kind of dismiss it and like, it didn't really work. But you can refine it, through subsequent prompts, and there's a lot you can do with it.
Exactly.
So,
and I feel like even maybe I'm not sure exactly of the rules of how kids are able to use it, if they're not, if it's in a tech class, but it's like even...
Us either.
But
it's
even
just
like,
so new. I think we're still figuring it
but
out.
I could, so I'll phrase it this way. I could see like one day though, as a teacher, like having kids work in groups, using ChatGPT to almost guide them in coming up with their own song. So again, you don't have to now have kids go create their own song. They could create their own song, but maybe with the help of it, you could say, okay, here's your blanket statement, but now I want you to customize it to the way that's going to help you memorize.
And then the learning is in vetting that output and saying this achieved what I wanted or didn't, or it's accurate or it's not, right? And those are what the students
and the
are
same
doing.
thing, I think my overall philosophy with technology in the classroom is use it as a tool. Right? It doesn't have to be your exact focal point of your lesson.
It should never honestly be your focal point at all. It should be assisting you.
It's an
just
enhancer.
Exactly. Just like AI is helping you with creating songs, that's what technology should be doing. It's never meant to be the objective of your lesson, and we talk about that all the time. Your objective should stick with curriculum.
Right.
You're bringing technology to, level up student engagement and all of that good stuff. So the one that I was thinking of was vocabulary, because you were talking about how it kind of sticks to you. And I always talk, and I've probably said it before on this podcast, that the first time I saw vocabulary, I wasn't in love with it. I was just like, where are they?
I thought it was corny
I was
and
like,
cheesy.
what? Are kids really going to like this? And then it was like a dinosaur one, like something about dinosaurs and learning about like the bone structure of dinosaurs and the history of dinosaurs. And I was like, I can't jive with this. And then I brought it to a class just to see like if it would stick. Just because it doesn't stick with me doesn't mean it's not going to stick with the kids. And then I went through the other ones, the math ones, the ELA ones, talking about grammar and punctuation. And I saw the kids' reactions, and they were just, the teacher said to me, you left, but they were still humming it all day long, and they remembered exactly what the goal of the lesson was, which was, how to use proper punctuation in a sentence and all of that. It helps. It has visuals. It has the quiz, the vocabulary words, the flip cards, all of that, those components too. So I think there is something to say that music aligns with,
Absolutely.
Remembering and regurgitating information.
My son is in 4th grade learning the times tables, and they have YouTube videos with songs about the different times tables. And it's literally just singing like what the answers are, just numbers. And he sings it all the time. He sits and does his math, and he's singing the song while he's doing it.
And it's really just another... Again, so it's like if you're listening, you're like, I'm not a singer in my classroom, I don't want to do that. It's just really just another strategy. So whether it's flashcards or there's so many different Pinterest ideas of how to get kids to memorize multiplication facts. So a song can just be another strategy that you're giving your class.
And in that case, it's a YouTube video. So you're not singing it, the video is singing it, and that's okay, right? It's another way to do it.
And I think I want to focus on that last part that I said. It's just giving the class the opportunity to. And I think that is a lot of kind of my philosophy with my culture is giving kids the opportunity to buy in. So just like a quick story, years ago, before I ever taught kindergarten, when I was student teaching, I watched this 5th grade teacher, and he was telling me stories about his class, and I was watching him, he was telling me about his culture and everything. And he ran like a really tight ship, and so he gave a lot of homework. He gave like over an hour of homework, right? Whatever your opinion of homework is, that's a lot. And he told me one time his class wasn't working up to his standard in the classroom. And so at the end of the day, instead of giving an hour of homework, he took away homework for the night. And he said, "You did not earn homework in this class." Right? So I kind of that, right? And we're all, and when I heard that, right, and everyone's reaction is like, "That's crazy." And he said he had kids go home and their parents emailed him that night saying their kid was crying because my teacher said I couldn't do homework and I didn't earn it.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine?
And that's like one of his favorite stories to tell. And I listened to that and I absorbed it, but then I reflected on that, right? You could just look at it surface level, oh, that's crazy. I always like to tell that story because it really, for me, it's like that shift in mindset, because I've had so many teachers say like, that would never work with my kids. That's crazy. I don't even like homework, right? But it's really reverse psychology. And this is really kind of, again, the backbone of my culture is if you do not give kids the opportunity to like doing homework or to even take pride in doing homework, then they're not going to. And you have kids in your classroom that are just waiting for that opportunity to buy into it. I'm not saying you're going to get, I have 18 kids in my classroom. I'm not saying you're going to get all 18. And I tell the parents to step back to school, now I may not get all 18 kids to enjoy doing homework, but I'm at least going to present the opportunity in a way where I think I'm going to get a lot of kids to buy into it. And then I've had parents come up to me saying like, one of the ways to do it is you offer extra homework, right? And again, I know it sounds crazy, but so I give my normal couple of math worksheets, a vocab sheet, and then I say, okay, who wants extra homework? And it's not just take the extra homework, it's who wants it, almost like it's a lottery, or we're raffling off something, right? And it's almost like that positive peer pressure, because then I have like, say you have the group of kids in your classroom, every class has it, maybe it's 3 kids, maybe it's 5 kids that will take it almost every single time. And what happens is it's almost like that positive peer pressure, because then this one is friends with this one, so they're like, okay, I'll take it. And then I said, okay, we have 8 kids taking extra homework. Can we get to 10? Can we get to 10 today? And all of a sudden you have 10 kids. And then even this year, I had one kid every single time, because some kids, they like to, it's like teasing. It's like the bond that you have with them. They'll kind of look at me and they'll say, I'm not going to take it today, right? To kind of get that reaction. But then I had this one kid finally take it after all this time, and the class was clapping and cheering.
So excited.
And it's just that buy-in. And again, it's really that shift in mindset. If you believe that your kids are always going to hate doing homework, if you believe that every kid in your class is going to hate doing tests, and that tests are something to be afraid of, then yes, it's going to be no surprise that your class does not enjoy taking a test, or that your class hates doing homework. But at least present the opportunity to them. Like I try and tell them with tests, like don't be afraid of it. Approach the test like, almost approach it with this mindset. Like these questions, they're trying to see if they're trying to see if they could trick you. Mm-hmm. So when you're answering this question, have that mindset like, you're not going to trick me. Right? And you approach it like that. You take pride in it. You take pride in doing the homework. You take pride in doing well on your tests. You take pride in being a part of the classroom. But I think it all stems from just the opportunity that you present kids. And again, it starts from that backward design. Okay, so I want kids to be, say, some of the highest performing kids on the standardized tests, right? Say that's a standard. So then the question is, okay, well, how am I going to get there? Okay, so I know I have to teach this, this, and this. I know I have to focus on this. I'm going to do it through songs. I'm going to do it through, okay, I'm going to stand on a desk. I'm going to embed extra homework.
In addition to that, I'm also going to create this environment where they believe that they can.
Right.
Like that's another element.
And I think there's so much research on these two aspects, on setting that high standard. When you communicate to them that the expectations are high, it builds the kids, it builds their self-worth, because then they start to believe, well, this person believes in me, so then I must be capable of it. And there's also so much research. All these different researchers, educators were looking on how to, I think, like I'm paraphrasing, but raise the reading level of a classroom, or get higher test scores on their reading tests. And so they looked across the country, okay, we tried this strategy, this strategy, this strategy, And if I'm not mistaken, the one that they found had the most bang for your buck was just using higher tiered vocabulary through the day. So again, it doesn't need to be these crazy lessons. It can be, and I thought that was like, you're looking for the secret of, if I just do this one, if we read this one book, or if I just teach them this one song, then they're going to become amazing with understanding theme. But really what they found is if you just embed higher tiered vocabulary throughout your day, the kids then end up picking that up, and it becomes, again, just like part of who they are. And I think whether it's like, for me, yes, I like to stand on a desk sometimes or a chair, or I like to sing songs with them, but engagement in every classroom just looks different. And so really what I encourage other teachers is not, sometimes I'll try and encourage teachers to just stand on a desk one time so that way they could see the switch that happens, that all it really is a 5-second switch in what you're doing throughout the lesson to get that reaction from them. Because that same reflection I had with engagement on standing on a desk was the same reflection that I had when that teacher told me about how he took away homework.
Right.
It's that same reflection that then I applied to tests. It's the same reflection I applied to, and it started in kindergarten. I know this sounds crazy, but I said, why do kids have to enjoy playing more than they enjoy learning? And so, right, and other teachers are like, oh, that's, of course kids are going to like playing more, and I may understand that, but at least I'm going to try. It's my job as
why does it have to be that
right,
way?
it's my job, and I think like if you're not going to get the kids to enjoy doing homework or enjoy learning in your classroom, then really the question is like, who is? And I think that's really like what it comes down to, is you as the teacher. And people could talk about, okay, like administrators, education as a whole, the curriculums, but at the end of the day, it's you with the door shut and your kids. What are you going to do to get them to buy into everything that you do?
Right, and I think a lot of the things that you're talking about apply across no matter what job you have, teaching, not teaching. It's all about the leadership component, and I would say that like you have strong leadership in your classroom, and if that leadership isn't there, you're not going to have your, the workers under you, the students under you, whoever's under you, they're not going to follow your lead, right? And I think that's what also creates that culture for you.
Yeah. There's a quote, I might be switching it around. Michael Bonner, who's an amazing teacher, amazing person that works at the Ron Clark Academy, the quote that he says, again, I might be switching it up, but he says, you can't demand a withdrawal without investing first.
Right.
And you could apply it to stock, right? You can't withdraw money, right, unless you invest in it. And so he says this. He applies the same mindset to kids. You can't demand their engagement. You can't demand their work ethic unless they see that you're investing time with them. And like, so with that, I say one of the best things I've ever done, or I continue to do, is just eat lunch with kids overall. It's like you spend 20 minutes of your day eating lunch with your kids, or the kids from last year, or kids in another classroom. You'll see that you'll start to build a culture, not just of your classroom, but of the school as well. What I've seen is like then kids in other classrooms start to get to know me. Then they say like, oh, can I come to your classroom? Can I come to your classroom? And then it's crazy because then the kids in my classroom see that, and then it builds their pride in, oh, Mr. Sabinsky is my teacher though,
Right.
and all these kids want to be in his classroom. They want to come, and it's
building a connection.
Exactly.
Sure.
So it's really, you can want all these different things from your students, but if you don't spend the time investing into them, then you can't demand that they're going to give you kind of what you're looking for.
I have to play devil's advocate, because if I'm a newer teacher and listening to everything you've said, I am overwhelmed for sure, right? We've touched upon a lot of different things, and it makes sense because culture is not just one thing. It's made up of a lot of different things. But if you were to give someone advice who's just sort of starting out in this realm, what would be like one thing they could start with?
The best piece of advice that I can give any teacher, especially one starting out, is determine what your goals are for your classroom, right? And have a concrete goal. So whether it's I want my students to be as engaged as they can into my lessons, right? Then you determine, okay, how am I going to do that? Okay, well, for this slide, I'm going to do a turn and talk. For the next slide, I'm going to have the kids whisper. For the next slide, and then you start working backwards like that. Whether it's, okay, I want them to get to this academic standard. how am I going to do that? Okay, well, I know that they're going to struggle here, so let me pre-teach it this way, or let me front load this topic. But I think it all really starts with the goal that you have for your students. And if you don't have a goal, then you don't really know the direction that you're going. It's kind of like the North Star. You have to know where you're going.
Makes sense.
So I think really start there with the goal that you have, I think. And then the second thing that I would just say to wrap it up is the kind of the theme that I've been trying to say is like shift your mindset. Don't just, when you get into teaching, don't just automatically think that because it's been done this way for 20 years that I then have to follow it, or a veteran teacher's telling me, well, this is the way it's always been. As a teacher, again, the door's shut, you're with your own kids, you have to determine what is going to be best for my kids.
Right.
So again, whether it's trying to get them to buy into doing your homework, buy into being excited to do a test, you have to believe that it's possible, because if you don't set that culture in your classroom, then you're going to see that kids aren't buying into what you want. So I think give kids the opportunity to love learning, to love doing things that maybe you didn't think were possible in your classroom. So I think set a high standard, set a goal, look at what has always been the norms of education. Kids don't like homework, kids don't like tests, kids don't like coming to school, and say, shift your mindset and say, well, wait a minute. That story that Jordan Sabinsky said about this teacher took away an hour of homework and now these kids are crying that they didn't get homework. Wait a minute, I could apply that to other areas of my classroom. Right. And just believe that it's possible. Like, the goal that you set for your students should be incredibly high. And I'm going to leave it off with a quote, and it's it's by Kim Bearden, who's another co-founder of the Ron Clark Academy, but she says, your high expectations are your outward manifestation of your belief in others. So to have high expectations is to really show that you believe in your kids.
Excellent. Thank you, Jordan.
Yeah, thank
I feel
you.
like you've given us a lot of great things to think about.
I've really tried to just give what I think is the most important parts of my classroom that I think are just so important for any teacher to really hear,
Yeah.
and then to internalize it the way that they're going to.
We appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.